We breaking bread, yeah. We breaking bread, yeah. We breaking bread, yeah. One conversation at a time. We breaking bread, yeah. We breaking bread, yeah. We breaking bread, yeah. One conversation at a time.
The Breaking Bread Village.
One conversation at a time.
The Breaking Bread Village.
One conversation at a time.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Breaking Bread Village. As you all know, I'm very excited about our conversation tonight with our guest. When I first started following her and started seeing the work that she does, I felt like she was my sister friend. I said, oh, that's my sister friend. So I had to reach out to her and just kind of see, if we could have this conversation. And she so graciously said yes. So I'm happy that we're here today. So I'm going to go ahead and bring her on so she can introduce herself as only I feel like she should be able to. So let me go ahead and bring on our guest. Hey, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. Thank you. Like I told the audience, I said, when I first started following your work, I'm like, that's my sister friend. And I said, I'm gonna reach out to her as she is my sister friend. And I'm so happy that you, accepted the invitation that we can have this conversation tonight.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead and introduce yourself to the people who may not know who you are.
My name is Rosa Clemente. I'm an organizer, independent journalist, scholar activist, and a 2008 Green Party vice presidential candidate.
Yeah, I know. That's so exciting. That part I did not know until I did a little more research. And I was like, oh, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, that's really cool. So, so we're going to just get started. First of all, I have to congratulate you and the team for Judas and the Black Messiah on the 5 Oscar nominations. That's incredible. And as stated here, this is the first time an all-Black production team has been nominated for Best Picture. So I think that is something to be proud of.
Yeah. Well, it's actually 6, and someone had to correct me because Daniel and Lakeith were both nominated as supporting actors. So
wow.
And yeah, it's the first time in Oscar history that an all-Black team, but it's also all Black men,
Yeah.
So even though women, like Regina King and so many dope women directors are out there right now. But yeah, it's incredible. I'm a pop culture kind of girl too. So I watch all the award shows. I always have something to say. And it's a little easy for me in that way. But also understanding that is nice, but to respond to the movie from our communities is what I'm really interested in.
Yeah, no, it was phenomenal. I mean, I remember just waiting for it to come out and watch it on HBO Max, and it was just incredible. And I know some people had mixed feelings about it. Some Black people in our community are what they consider tired of seeing movies where we die in the end. But for me, I appreciate the Black Panther movement, especially during that time, because I think that it's been kind of painted in the wrong way in regards to how they depicted it to the public. It was a lot of things that they did to help our community. So I appreciate the story. And but I want to ask you, how was it for you to be a part of this process? Like, why did you feel that this was something that you needed to do and be a part of?
Well, I mean, first I want to say that I listened to many of the critiques. I don't know if you can hear that feedback. Does it sound okay?
I don't hear feedback. So
okay. So that Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. was involved from the beginning. I feel like a lot of people try to take his agency away, and part of that is also a lot of other people had tried to make this movie and went to the family for a long time. And this time, why it happened were, 2 things. First, that Shaka Keen was a college student in New York City. At that time, when he was a college student, the organization that I've been politically raised up in, the Malcolm X grassroots movement, we did a yearly concert called Black August to celebrate Black August as a historical month and link it back to the foundings of Black August were from brothers that were incarcerated in St. Quentin. And that Art Concert was about bringing artists to the table to politically educate them around political prisoners and prisoners of war and other important issues, and also to always support the freedom of Assata Shakur.
Yeah.
So part of that whole process was always working with artists. Someone like Talib Kweli, you don't have to tell anything to, because he was raised up in a political house and in Brooklyn, New York, and all of this. And then some other people, you'd be like, oh, this is the first time understanding what a political prisoner is. And that whole experience, it was one of the biggest shows in Brooklyn, New York, a year after Chairman Fred Hampton Jr. was released from his incarceration, and Shaka Keen went to that show, and he had heard, and he was raised in Brooklyn. He really understood the Black Panther Party. So then the Lucas brothers, who are comedians, about 4 years ago, told Shaka, "No, we should do a movie about Fred Hampton." So Shaka had been previous to that. He had been to Black August, and Fred was at that show too. So all of this is kind of brewing. And then Shaka and me, Charles, Ryan Coogler, are part of this collective called Blackout for Human Rights that Ryan Coogler and Ava DuVernay started to bring artists, activists, and organizers together. And I've stayed in it along with some of my other comrades as organizers, and really built some relationships with some of the folks on the more Hollywood creative side. So 3 years ago, Dr. King hit me up and was like, "Yo, are you in contact with Chairman Fred?" I was like, "Yeah, definitely." And he told me, and I was like, "A lot of people have tried to make this movie, so I don't know what's going to happen." A good start is that it's Ryan Coogler, you, and Charles King, right? But particularly Ryan, right? Like, it's Ryan Coogler.
Right, right.
And that first meeting we had in Chicago, it took a long time for us to do it, but when we got there, Ryan and Chairman Fred realized that like 10 years before that, Chairman Fred was at a farmer's market, and Ryan was just entering college, and they met.
Oh,
and
wow.
in Chicago, they have met. So from there was a 3-year process of like all the Hollywood stuff and all of that. My role was really to get, connect with Fred, go to the meeting, and just kind of be a little bridge to that.
Sure.
I found a part of me that I didn't know I had around creativity, and that I really, at this point in my life, want to bring people's stories forward. And look, it was not an easy process. It's a lot of love, it's a lot of labor, it's a lot of debate, it's a lot of like, oh, do I say something now? Do I wait? What's the bigger thing? And all of this. But for me, I also understand the power of media.
Yeah.
That this is a teaching tool. And lastly, as a Puerto Rican, I was definitely happy that the Young Lords would be in it, because the founder of the Young Lords, Chacha Jimenez, turned his student organization into a political organization because he met Chairman Fred Hampton Sr., Mark Clark, Pooh and Jerry, and them. So I was like, as Puerto Ricans, we still don't have one movie that represents us. All we have is the entire story.
Right.
The most racist movie ever. They're actually making a remake of it. That's how racist it is.
Oh, they are. Oh, wow.
Yeah. I was like, as a Puerto Rican, like, we rep, and I was like, it might not have been a lot of minutes on the screen, but there are those 2 moments where, like, every Puerto Rican I knew was like, yo,
Right.
Yeah, I had a little something to do with that, just a little bit.
No, that's what's up.
So for me, the movie was supposed to come out last year, then the pandemic hit.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so the movie had finished principal filming on October of 2019, and it would have come out on Black August 2020. But then the pandemic.
Yeah.
And this is one of the movies that this new experiment of like releasing things online in the theater happened. But lastly, what I do want to say is I encourage everybody right now to read the article in the Hollywood Reporter that is Ryan King, Shaka King, and Ryan Coogler, Shaka, and Charles King, not related, but both King. And that not only are they the first team, when you read the interview, you understand how much they respected the family, and also what it means for the future of what movies can look like that represent our movements. And they're not going to do anything. It's not
Right.
it's not a documentary, it's a movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, I think that's dope. I mean, I loved it. I love so much of it. So I appreciate the work that you do. And, I definitely appreciate the movie. I really want to talk about too, we're going to kind of segue into something else, because I really find that the more I talk to people about that era, and even today, people really don't understand COINTELPRO. They don't understand that some people don't believe it's a real thing. They think that it's just a myth or something that we made up, and it definitely is not. So I wanted you to kind of talk about COINTELPRO and what your thoughts are, and just how it directly impacted the liberation movements, and like the Black Panther Party, and also how it applies today, because people don't think that. Even if they believe that it happened then, they don't believe that it's still happening now. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so the counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO, was started in 1955 when J. Edgar Hoover became the director of the FBI. So the first real tenets of COINTELPRO were them spying on Dr. Martin Luther King. And they would make phone calls, they would send letters. By now, people know that Dr. King had maybe one or two affairs, like that's the truth, right? You know? And they would use that and call his wife Coretta, call people in his family, be like, he's sleeping around you, he's sleeping with white women, like, and part of it was they would go to the hotel the day before Dr. King. And at that time, I'm sure there was security, but people may have not been like, there's a bug in the phone.
Right.
And so they started really with Dr. King. Once Dr. King is assassinated in 1968, and before that, you're going to begin to see the opposition to the Vietnam War. You're going to begin to see organizations like the Students for a Democratic Society, not the Black Panther Party is being. Then the Young Lords, the Brown Berets, the White Patriots, who were part of the Rainbow Coalition, the American Indian Movement, and the Underground, as well as everybody was against the Vietnam War.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So when Dr. King is assassinated, I think J. Edgar Hoover thought that's it. But by then they had been, not J. Edgar Hoover, the people, but by then they had already infiltrated all the organizations. So like Will was not the first snitch, and he's not the last one,
Right.
But they already had infiltrated organizations. But at that time, what people have to realize is that particularly the Black Panther Party for self-defense were young people, the Young Lords. These were people who were 16 and 17. Like Mumia joined the Black Panther Party when he was 14. Chairman Fred Hampton Sr. was already part of the NAACP, and then he joined the Black Panther Party for self-defense. Now, from 1968 to about the mid-70s, that's when you see more of the revolutionary wings of even the Black Panther Party. So then you have the Black Liberation Army.
Mm-hmm.
That was what Assata Shakur was part of, how she was freed. There were the Young Lords, again, part of the Rainbow Coalition, mostly Puerto Rican.
Mm-hmm.
But then came the Machateros, which were the underground Puerto Ricans who, with other Black Liberation Army people, were reappropriating money from banks. Read about that.
Yeah.
But by the by early '69, this is why the assassination of Chairman Fred. And people have to remember that Mark Clark was also assassinated. There were other Panthers that night in that apartment that survived, and that his partner, Akua Njeri, was 8.5 months pregnant.
Right.
With Chairman Fred. So their whole plan was to everybody to die. They didn't want the baby. They don't want Chairman Fred Jr. also. That was not only all orchestrated, that J. Edgar Hoover said that the Black Panther Party is the greatest threat to domestic to the United States of America.
Right.
After that would be the Puerto Ricans and the Young Lords and the Puerto Rican liberation movements. So, like, it all at them. They worked with local police. The assassination, they thought that would end the movement, and it just made it more radical. You know, when you talk to elders that are still alive, they definitely can tell you like where they were, what they were wearing the moment they heard that Chairman Fred and Mark Clark have been assassinated. So what I tell people is when we look at these movements, either people have been assassinated, incarcerated, or some of them, very few, were able to get to other countries, particularly Cuba, that gave them political asylum. So a lot of times when I'm teaching and talking to young people, they'll be like, so what happened? I said, the government happened. And the government, you're talking about the military apparatus of the United States government. And one of the first tenets of COINTELPRO is to sow disruption and discord. So they didn't just start by like picking off people. They would send a letter to one organization and be like, well, your organization is whack, or are you doing this, or this person's a snitch. And because by then it's already been infiltrated, then you're talking about young people with these young folks were like, we're not going to survive, but the revolution will. So they put their bodies on the line, and they also knew how to defend themselves. And all of this is why you've seen this. But currently, we still have people from that era that fought for us to be free and are sitting in prison right now.
Yes.
On over 50 years. So what we have to realize is like, listen, it was not only the state and the government, it was also how we didn't trust each other, but also how ego and all the isms that we also have really help to weaken the movement so that they can be attacked the way all these organizations were attacked between 1969 and 1977.
Yeah, and it's still going on today. You know, this is still current. I mean, this is still happening. You know, anytime somebody, you know, everybody calls each other snitches. Everybody calls each other, you know, an agent. I mean, it happens so much. But a lot of times people think that it's something of the past, and it's really not. I mean, this is still very, very prevalent today.
Yeah, I mean, and younger folks have to be careful in this sense. Like I said, I come out of Malcolm X grassroots movement, but part of our organizing, the things that we were taught with, not only did we talk to our elders from those movements that told us, don't like repeat this, don't make that mistake. We're also people who train and are pretty well at realizing like who in that crowd is the disruptor, could be the agent, and all of that. And it's a fine line because when you're doing this movement work, especially before social media, where things could be more intentional and you know what we're planning, you know, you don't want to be paranoid.
Right.
But there are telltale signs. And I always talk about my experience here in Albany, New York. I came to college in Albany, New York. I graduated, worked in the city, came back to Albany, and I was getting ready to move back. I had come up here because I was engaged and I thought it was going to be all the flowers, and it didn't happen. So after that, I was like, why am I still here in Albany? Let's get back to New York City. So I called my mentor, Richie Perez, who was in the Young Lords Party and passed away too early. And I said, get me any job. I got to get out of Albany. And he said, no, actually, you have to stay there. They just announced that the trial against the officers who killed Amadou Diallo, who was an African immigrant that was shot 41 times in 1999, they moved the trial to Albany. So he was like, you stay right there.
Right, you got work to do, right.
And those the people I organize with are my comrades. Now we're talking about months of a trial coming up. we had different organizations every day at the courthouse. Then we were like young, we had no money, we're making signs, we're sleeping like 10 people in an apartment close to the place. So we're organizing. And right before the verdict, I think that was one of the only times that I thought cops would get convicted, but part of it was because I was just getting into the movement.
Right.
The elder said those cops are going to walk. We were like, that's impossible. Like, it's 41 charges. Like,
right, with all the evidence, how can they walk? Right.
And we're like, well, what happens if they walk? What's going to be our protest? And we're sitting there hours, and then one person is like, yo, but I think we need to have some guns. And I was like, what? And I said, nobody up here is talking about no guns, dude. Like,
right.
what are you talking about? And he kept saying and saying, and one of my homies was like, yo, let's just like end the meeting. We ended the meeting, and we followed this dude, white guy. We follow him, and he is supposed to always be going back to college. So he always said he was taking the bus. Saw him, he was being picked up by an undercover detective.
Oh, wow.
At that time. We Albany is very small, so we even know who the undercovers were. And we were like, oh, this dude's an infiltrator. So the next day when the verdict was announced and it was not guilty, we did what maybe before Black Lives, but people have always taken over the streets, right? And we were facing like this horse line, and the captain of the pit police were like, are you going to move? And we were like, no. White boy kind of shows up, gets in the line, like two from me. And this is interesting because at that time, we also had some conversations with the police, like, we're going to do this, arrest us, but don't like mess with anybody else. It was a right thing. And so I basically called the captain, and his name is O'Malley. I was like, Captain O'Malley, this dude's not with us. And he goes, what? I said, this dude's not with us. So please remove him, and we're going to stay here. They removed him. We got arrested. Next day, we go to New York City, biggest protest, all of that. 2 years later, I'm in Washington, D.C., and the same white guy comes up to me at an event. He's like, oh, what's good, Rose? I haven't seen you since Albany, New York.
Wow.
I was like, and there it is. And subsequent to that, there have been other times where I've been like, and people are like, no, you're paranoid, you're wrong. And I kind of end up being right. But part of that is I'm a historian. And that is also understanding COINTELPRO. They never stop. They don't care if it's 5 of us. Right. Let alone millions of us. They're going to infiltrate. They're going to do what they always do. And as a woman who's always being told, don't regard like your instinct, I just have an instinct for these things, and I've been right. Right.
No. And sometimes you just, like you say, you can feel it. You can feel it. Especially when somebody is pushing something that you know is going to get people killed or, violently arrested, and they keep pushing it. It's like, why are you so motivated? What's your motivation for this?
Exactly. That's exactly how it was.
Yeah. No, that's that's wild. And people don't understand unless you really deal with that type of stuff, how much it can get to you in regards to, like you said, paranoia. Am I being paranoid, or is this real? Should I go with my gut? Should I not? People just don't understand unless they're in that walk. So, I want to ask you too about state violence, and you kind of just touched on that a little bit. We definitely saw in the scene with Fred Hampton being murdered. Can you explain that a little bit more to us, like what state violence is?
State violence is when whatever nation you live in uses their military power to target the citizens of their country.
Yeah.
We call it state violence too because it envelops all of the particularly parts of the criminal and justice system, from incarceration to the death penalty to getting arrested for weed while white people are making mad money off of it. Even like in some neighborhoods, there's red light cameras. So if you cross for me, that's all part of the state apparatus of violence, because what you end up getting is living in a society as Black and brown folks where not only are we consistently monitored, that the state is always to be believed.
Right.
You know, and for those that might be watching the trial, I'm watching it from gavel to gavel, because you see in this trial right now, the whole apparatus, like the one string has been pulled. And it's been interesting to see, like, even the white EMT who told you she was an EMT. My thought on this has been like, at one point, Derek Chauvin knew, damn, I should take my knee up.
Yeah.
But the other part of him sees George Floyd as inhuman, not a person, but also part of policing is that they're always right. So if even he had said to himself, shit, let me get up now. Like, let me take the L and maybe suspended for a week or two.
Right. We're paid probably, or
He wouldn't do that because he has bought into state violence. Once he was pinned down, he was never going to let George Floyd up. You see, so that's how what we talk about state violence. But state violence is also houselessness, no health care, because we focus a lot of our conversations on state violence of the policing apparatus, but the other systems that allow children to go hungry, that allow trans folks to be killed without anybody caring, allow solitary confinement, the death penalty, all of that is all state violence. And no one should expect anything else of this country, because this country is founded on violence. The genocide land of Native people, the enslavement of African people, the exploitation of particularly Chinese labor. And that people should always remember that the reason the American project is a failure and they need state violence and capitalism to keep it going is the founding fathers themselves didn't think that the women they slept with or their mothers were equal. And they let them white people out of their constitution or the Declaration of Independence, right? So if they did that to the person that they're in love with, none of us had a chance in that way. So that's how we do it now.
Awesome. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. That is true for real. And I like how you touched on the homelessness part and going hungry and the healthcare, because that is a part of it. And that's a problem that people don't understand is just as violent and just as detrimental to our society as the police brutality and, that part of it. So thank you for touching on that. I definitely want to ask you, because you kind of mentioned it earlier about Black Lives Matter. What's your thoughts about what's going on right now? And just what's your thoughts about Black Lives Matter?
Well, I support Black Lives Matter 100%. I support right now many of us and others who are speaking out about the attacks, particularly against Patrisse Cullors, that includes death threats.
I didn't know she was getting death threats too. I heard that she was getting kind of trying to be intimidated, but I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah, no, there's been death threats for years, particularly with the founders, Alicia Opal.
Yeah, that's okay.
But there's been since last summer even more death threats, particularly because Patrisse is also the only founder that's still within Black Lives Matter, where Alicia and Opal have built out other organizations, but are still the founders. And then threats against Dr. Melina Abdullah, a lot of threats against the BLM LA chapter, in particular the Chicago, DC. So, for me, I was in Ferguson when the rebellion happened.
Okay.
So I knew something was really different in terms of first that these young people were not trying to hear from like pastors and older Black men and the patriarchy. They weren't with that. They were trying to see like people just coming into their community. So when I went there with Jessica Care Moore, because Talib Kweli, a hip hop artist, was like, yo, I think we should go down. You think it's a little different? I said, something's real different about what's going on there. Let's go. And we went. I've stayed in contact with a couple folks from there, particularly T-Dub-O, who's one of the illest hip hop artists ever. People
I want to talk to you about your hip hop stuff too, but we might be able to get to that. Yeah,
we'll get to it. And then I said to myself when I went to Ferguson, like, you have to stay connected to people here, because I already knew that a lot of people would be using the Ferguson Rebellion to further their careers, to line their pockets. People co-opt it. Black Lives Matter had already been a hashtag. Ferguson happens, Ferguson propels it. And here you are 7 years later. And, you know, it's interesting because movements iteration usually last 5 to 8 years.
Okay, yeah.
7th year of what I call the Black Lives Matter historical era. So with Dream Defenders, Mi Gente, Malcolm X Grassroots, all of this, but we're within now this era, as historians put it, of Black Lives Matter. And I met Patrice right when Black Lives Matter started. I ended up living in the same community she was in LA, called St. Elmo Village. And Dr. Melina Abdullah had brought me out there so I could but do my pre-doctoral fellowship. So I spent a year out there. That was where Black Lives Matter really grew. And me and my daughter were part of Black Lives Matter LA. In fact, this week was the 5th year since me and 5 other BLM people in LA went to trial. A trial that was supposed to be 2 days that lasted 29 days because they were really trying to convict us.
Wow.
So, my work with Black Lives Matter has been really intimate, dear, comrades, sister friends, and all of that. As I moved back here to New York and started working again in Albany, New York, doing what I do, I've always supported BLM. And now I'm supporting it more because of what I think are unconscionable attacks against Patrice and Melina, also very patriarchal and misogynistic attacks. Because I'm like, when are you going to talk to men the way you all are talking to them? And legitimately, people look at BLM last year, they won so many victories. They've removed a district attorney.
Oh.
Jackie Lacey, because of the work of BLM LA.
Wow.
And I'm not one who's big on electoral politics on the Democrats or Republicans.
Right.
If you want to talk about, like, you know, a couple of goals that has happened, that happened. And Melina is a very dear friend. And it was not, it was very hard to see that last year at a protest in front of Jackie Lacey's house, Jackie Lacey's husband came out and pointed a gun.
Oh, wow.
To Melina Abdullah's chest and threatened to shoot her.
Oh, wow.
And it's all available online because they were carrying the protest live.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay, so a lot of people say a lot of things. It's kind of like how I think I would have jumped in and tried to push Derek Chauvin off.
Yeah, I know, right. Yeah.
The guilt that all those witnesses, because it's their job to do that. But you see an 8-year-old to 61-year-old man saying, I should have done something. See, that's terror and trauma. So we all think we'll be that person that jumps in. We all think we're that person that's like, point a gun at my chest. I'm good until it happens.
Right.
And in fact, right before I came on here, Melina and Patrice and Uncle Bobby, who's Oscar Grant's father, just did a really good interview answering a lot of people's concerns on Roland Martin, how they're feeling, how they are going to continue to support families and all of that. But I'm at a point in my life where, you know, I stand by my principles and my loyalty, particularly to Black women, who have helped me become who I am as well. And I'm just not going to be on the wrong side of this. It's dangerous. And I hope that when people not only support them, like Travis, you can also join Black Lives Matter and make it the organization that you want it to be if you don't like whatever you don't do right now. It's not a stagnant movement. It's live, it's breathing, it's organic. Mistakes are going to happen, growth is going to happen, but that we should be inviting people in. So I'm all about, like, lastly, I've just changed a lot in my life around. I really don't want to be part of call out culture that I've partaken in, because it harms other people, but eventually harms you. It makes you trust and all that. And I don't want that for our people. So whether people support Black Lives Matter or not, we have to find a way where we can talk with each other and debate even political ideologies, but not attack a human, threaten their lives and threaten their children's lives and leak their address online. So
Oh, wow. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you, because it's a couple people that are out there right now that are for the Black community that I don't always necessarily agree with, every part of their movement, but I do stand with people in regards to them being respected and being protected, because nobody should be, like you said, their lives should be threatened or it's like that, and letting their addresses out. It's just such a coward and like a cowardly way to be, and just a punk move. It's like, a lot of these people are behind these, computer screens. Yeah. And it's just this era right now with this whole social media thing is wild to me. I mean, I couldn't imagine having it, when I was in high school or when I
wouldn't have survived, I don't think.
No, it's so whack to me sometimes, because people do become these personas that like are not real, and it's just, and they become these fake images and hide behind that to threaten people and to bully people. And I'm just not with that. So so since you're talking about movements, I do want to talk to you kind of like about the Me Too movement. I know you do stand with women, and I know there's a lot of allegations with different people. I know Como and different people in the media right now. What's your thoughts on the Me Too movement? And just that. What's your thoughts on the Me Too movement?
I mean, for me and so many women in my generation, hip hop women generation, Tarana Burke's been doing this work for over 20 years. She's the reason many of us were even able to begin to tell our stories a while ago. So when the hashtag explodes and a white woman from Hollywood is like the person, a lot of us were already on the record like, nah, Tarana Burke's been doing that for 20 years and you can't, erase a Black woman. Also, what people conflate with the men and what's happening with them, is that Tarana has always been clear that Me Too is about the survivors. That Me Too is not just about like find these men, lock them up, throw away the key.
Right.
It's a hard position for people who believe in the abolition of mass incarceration, right? That Me Too, Tarana's work is groundbreaking because she focuses, and that movement focuses on the survivors. But since it blew up during the Weinstein and this whole last 3 years, people conflate what particularly other mostly white women are doing, which is, not only telling their stories, but they want to see justice through the criminal courts. The majority of African American, Latina, Native women, most of the times it's not even about the court.
Exactly.
Especially like when you live in communities where you're like, as a woman, sometimes to our fault, we don't want to get the police involved, right? We don't want the state involved. I would tell people like read Tarana's work for decades. It's about many of us who survived sexual violence, sexual assault, and that there is a mechanism and Time's Up that was started by Hollywood actresses, but now is a full organization. There are resources for women who were like, no, I want to see the guy arrested and all of that. And then there's the Me Too resources, which is like, where do we put the focus back on survivors, but also ending toxic manhood.
Yes. Yeah.
For men as well, and trans people as well, and women as well. So I am so excited. Tarana just announced that her memoir is coming out in September. So it'll be 4 years since Me Too happened. And honestly, for those of us who've known her for so long, it was like, yeah, you should have been shining, because
Yeah.
she's always had a space for us to feel safe, and to also grapple with, like, how do we deal with particularly Black and brown men who have abused us? How do
Yes.
we internalize the patriarchy and hurt other women, that, and how can Black and brown men, especially again in my generation, almost being 50, really understand this is not an attack against y'all, but we really need to be telling the truth about a lot of particularly men that you see have really good game talk, and are doing really awful things behind the scenes. And I'm sure there's no sister that's either an artist or an organizer that probably couldn't mention, unfortunately, a couple men just in their purview.
Yeah. Yeah.
And lastly, that this newer generation of younger people, right? Like, not only are they breaking the binary on gender, they are very quick to know and call out rape culture,
Yeah.
toxic male culture, families and old school families telling us, just ignore it, or just don't go around your Theo or your cousin, and you're like, nah, why? When you look back at a generation of us as African American Latino women who were born in the 70s and the 80s, I have never met a sister who didn't have an experience,
Yep.
one with someone in their family. And to share that then with particularly our mothers, who were like, yo, don't tell nobody, everything
Yes.
cool, put out a perfect face, this is how you show up. That really, for our generation of women, like, internally has eaten us up for decades. And you have women now that are 48 that are finally able to be like, okay,
To breathe. Yeah.
And that dude cannot be at the family reunion again, or I'm not going to be in that space if these particular men in our families are invited into these spaces.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I feel that. And when you talked about this generation, I say it all the time, has not come to play. This generation is doing the work. And I love that they are, feeling free to speak up and be their unique selves, and, no fear. And I love that, because you are right, especially, I grew up in a Christian Baptist environment. And you really, and I'm only speaking from that because of my experience, not necessarily in my household, but just overall in general, in the Christian experience, a lot of it was, you just be quiet. This is just, just pray about it. God sees all. And it's like, I understand that part, if that's what you say, but it's a little bit deeper than that. So it was a lot of that, just be quiet and just move on and just pray about it. That was the end all be all to it. You know what I'm saying?
No, I was raised as a Catholic, and the cognitive dissonance in my family is sometimes shocking.
Yeah.
Because once I never had to go to church, I never went again, except, I've been to a funeral, my nephew's baptism, like respecting those wishes, and my abuela's funeral and stuff, but man, I have to tell some, like, do you see the Catholic Church? Like, they're bankrupt for a reason.
Yeah.
Like, and the Catholic Church and all the pedophilia and rape of these priests to the men, to the boys, no one talks about how the nuns treated us.
I went to Catholic school. So I remember getting hit and thrown over to the side. Oh yes, I remember that. So yeah.
I didn't go to Catholic school. My sister ended up going. I went to the public school, but I knew everybody else who went.
Yeah.
And we knew the nuns that were mean, but also that there were nuns who abused little girls. And no one talks about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Nobody has even touched what that could look like. And now I've seen some like shorts of a couple elderly like women who were like, the nuns did this to us and that. But also like in the Catholic Church, like your loyalty is to No, I don't know what that happened. That's a spam call. That was ridiculous.
That's okay. That happened to me the other day.
Okay.
I was like, oh my God. Yeah.
I don't even know what that is. But
that you were saying you watched the short. You watched the short.
Yeah, that. But that as a girl, the Catholic who you pray to is the Virgin Mary. I mean, come on, it's a mythology. Like, she didn't have sex and get pregnant. No, immaculate conception.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, so whoever's Catholic right now, you literally believe that this woman got pregnant by some star, like, just crazy. I'm like,
yeah,
that's a fairy tale, right? Or not a fairy tale, but that's not true, right? But I try to respect people, but I'm just like, as a girl, I'm supposed to be like the Virgin Mary. That's why we all had issues with our sexuality when we got older as women. Like,
thank you. I really want to do a show about that because I speak very freely about sex, and I speak very freely about, body parts, because it's just a natural process. And, ever since I was younger, I've always been like, why are people afraid to talk about certain things? And it's that suppression that causes people to, do different things because they don't feel that freedom, Yeah. There's nothing wrong with it.
Exactly.
And since we're on like the Me Too movement, I know that because I want to kind of get into the hip hop party. I mean, because you are a hip hop lover. I did a lot of research. I'm like, oh, she is in hip hop for real. And I love that. And I know you also spoke out about the misogyny that is in the hip hop culture as well. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely spent, I would say, like 10 to 15 years really engaged within hip hop culture.
Yeah.
Working with folks that saw hip hop, and I think they're still right, as a political tool of engagement and all of that. But I have not been involved in anything around hip hop in that way for like the last 5 years. And it really just ended up being like, this is an incredible culture that was founded by like African-American, Puerto Ricans, Jamaicans in the South Bronx. We should all know that history. We should understand that there is an element around knowledge and culture and politics. But I don't participate in a lot of hip hop stuff anymore because I think the political part of it has become very stagnated. Yeah. And I really can't deal with, again, like men who are like almost 50 acting and being able to get away with the behavior because they're hip hop pioneers or hip hop artists. And and that hip hop itself, but the part of it that's musical is just trash for the most part, right? It is artistically, it's like, where is it? Now it exists. There's groups, there's individuals that I follow and I'm always going to follow who are producing incredible music, art, and art, because of where it has gone. And because it still allows for toxic male behavior unapologetically, that's not my fight anymore.
Right.
And that's where I am with that.
I think that's happened to a lot of people that have a love for hip hop, like real hip hop, where it's like it's gone so left to where a lot of people are just not as connected to it as they were. And like you said, talking about the misogyny that's attached to it. And everybody just welcomes it. People aren't really seeing the stuff that we give permission to say, like, this is okay for you to treat me like this or talk to me this way. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate the work. I mean, because I saw the work that you did. So I appreciate what you contributed to it, but I also understand how you had to kind of step back. Like, this is not what it was anymore. You know what I'm saying?
It's not, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. It means that young people will create something different. But the fact that we're still finding out about some of the pioneers, the men, and I'm like, another story, of course. Another scandal, of course, another rape apologist, another, like, it's just like there's only so much you can do till you realize, like, okay, this space is not willing to progress. It's actually become regressive.
Yeah.
Also, and I get this part, that hip hop particularly did give African American Latino men an outlet.
Yeah, for sure.
Not only to create, but to let out a lot of their anger or the beauty in their community, how they saw their communities differently,
Yeah.
even though the state did this. But those very men have, for the most part, look, all I have to say is everybody watch Drink Champs and tell me how many times there's been a woman on. Never.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look at all these quote pioneers and look at their feeds and everything, and look at them always apologizing for someone, a man that created harm.
Yeah.
I knew going into Ferguson and seeing a new iteration of people that hip hop was losing its ground. But now, like, if I see my daughter listening to someone at 24, they're like, yeah, Little Baby had a nice song, but I listen to way 9 million other genres of music. Like they are not participating not only musically, they also like, if the space is toxic and old, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like us, we need to step aside. They
Yeah.
ain't doing that.
Right.
Oh yeah.
No, word, yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate your aspect of your take on that. I really want to ask you about the article that you wrote, Who is Black, as we close out, because it was so powerful, man. I was reading it, and this is when I was doing some research, and I'm like, wow, this is dope. I really, really enjoyed that. And I like the perspective that you gave. So I want you to share a little bit of what that article was about so that people can understand who is Black, because I love it, because I love poetry too. So it was like very like it was kind of like poetry to me. It was just real. I don't know, it was just the way it flowed out, the way you talked about it, and the imagery and just visuals that I got from it. I found it really really nice. So if you can talk about that for me.
Yeah, I wrote that article. I had just joined the Malcolm X grassroots movement. I was living in New York City. Really, like, Brooklyn was just incredible right before gentrification. And I was at a meeting, and one of my fellow comrades was like, yeah, Rosa, you're Black, but you're really not Black. And I was like, well, my mom is light skinned. She's still Puerto Rican. My dad's obviously African descendant, Puerto Rican, and your mom is white. So I was like, who is Black?
Right.
Made me want to write, because to this day the writing process is really difficult for me, but I just gone home and wrote something. And at that time, because it was 2001, it's crazy, we didn't have anything but like AOL and maybe listservs or something.
Yeah.
I wrote it, and then I posted on a listserv, and then this brother that everybody should know, especially within hip hop, Davey D, who's like the foremost like journalist, archivist of hip hop history.
Yeah.
Emailed me, maybe. Did I have a phone? I don't. It was like 2001.
Right. I know.
And he was like, "I'm gonna share your thing," and he did. And then the Final Call, which is the paper, the Nation of Islam,
Yeah.
was out. One of the editors was like, I read your piece. Can we put it in the paper? And I said, yeah. And the response at that time was just like crazy, and what it was for me is that me being a Malcolm X grassroots movement, but also being mentored by Dr. Maita Moreno Vega, who is just like, she went to retire in Puerto Rico and she just built 2 institutions because she's that dope.
Yeah.
I met her when I was an undergrad in college, and through her, I met, I guess, my longest comrade to this day, Lumumba Akinwale Bandeli, that comes out of the East community in Brooklyn, and was really someone I looked to for politics. And I, at that time, was like, well, I'm a person of African descent, and like, who is Black? What does that mean? Like, are we talking about phenotype or politics? And in it, I addressed anti-Blackness. I said at that point, like, the whole world is anti-Black. So to racialize myself as a Black, and then my nation, my ethnicity, Puerto Rican, is not taken away from me being a Boricua. Is actually understanding my roots.
Mm-hmm.
Ancestors, my elders now, and my peers and comrades who, what I've always told people is I've been more accepted in, quote, African American Black spaces than in Latino spaces.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, even to this day now, even with all the discussion on Afro, Black, Latino, Latina, Latinx identity, like it's interesting because there are now white Latinos and Latinas that are co-opting that, and all of a sudden they're like, I'm Black. You're like, dude, no, you're not. Like, first, no, you really not Black. And second, you just doing this to have like a brand strategy or marketing.
Right.
Because for me, I don't talk about just phenotype. I'm talking about if you are going to claim to be Afro, Black, Latina, Latinx, it's not necessarily just how you look. It's also, are you in the fight for Black freedom? Right? So you can have people that are phenotypically very dark, i.e. Clarence Thomas, who are anti-Black.
Yes.
Same in the Latinx community.
Yeah.
Where I think the discussion has taken a wrong turn, and I've intervened in that, is that for the last couple of years, there's been this narrative being built that all of a sudden it is like Afro, Black, Latinx people, or those that don't claim that they're African descendant, indigenous descendant, right? That all of a sudden we are anti-Black. Dominicans are anti-Black. Mexicans are anti-Black. Puerto Ricans are anti-Black. And right, like the last year, anybody, and I'm sure I know you've seen it, you see all these conversations about anti-Blackness.
Yeah.
And that is important. But what's more important is destroying white supremacy that helps create anti-Blackness.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, with that being said, me, my sister, anybody I know that's Afro, Black, Latino, Latina, Latinx identified, we've all had to intervene in our families at one point and be like, say that one more time. This dude's coming. I'm not coming to the family reunion.
Right.
The N-word again and see what happens.
Yeah.
We do that. But so who does it reward, or who does it help to see now that we're, as Latinx people, anti-Black?
Right.
Who's anti-Black is the white cop, the Black cop, the Latino cop, like all of that. And then at the same time be checking people in our community like, yo, stop acting like you're very different. But part of this is that I do want to give grace, and people have to learn what white supremacy is.
Yeah.
What is anti-Blackness? That the Africans who were kidnapped from the continent of Africa, when you are raised in the United States, you think that every person that was taken from Africa ended up in the United States. No, 12%, maybe 15% that were taken from the continent in the whole Mayafa, the Middle Passage, did not end up in the United States. They ended up in what we know to be Latin America, the Caribbean, West Indies, South America. And that when given the opportunity to claim Blackness, people will. And the perfect example is the Mexican census 5 years ago. For the first time ever, put Black as a racial category, and 1.8 million Mexicans chose that. Is that a number in comparison to the population? No.
Right.
But that's the first time that they could pick that. Here in the United States, we don't even have the census. This current one would not even give me an opportunity to identify of who I am.
Right.
And that lastly, we have to, especially as Afro, Black, Latino, Latina, Latinx identified people, the minute you have your child, you have to instill that in your child. And this is what I mean. When I gave birth to my daughter, I had a really hard pregnancy. It was a good birth. She came out great. I was fine. You know, they give you the birth certificate like later on that day, and the doctor already checked off Hispanic.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
So what I tell people is like Hispanic means a descendant of Spain. Spain was my abuela, rapist and colonizer. I don't claim that. I don't claim that 1/3 were indigenous, African, white. No, I'm not claiming the rapist and colonizer. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to need a new one. And I was like, first of all, how are you just checking it off?
Right, exactly.
Well, then second, again, there's no category. So I put other, the X, and I put Black Puerto Rican. And she was like, we can't take this. And I was like, yeah, you can. Like, this is for her Social Security card. Okay. Like,
Right.
you're not giving me benefits on this or whatever. She's like, there's not a category. I said, yeah, I just made one.
Right, exactly.
Dude, you just had a baby. Can you just like chill for a minute? I said, no, because that's exactly where it starts, right? It starts when my father or my mom or anyone that's Boricua, they might look at their birth certificate and have been already identified as white. That's where it starts. It starts from the minute our babies are born. So my way to counter that was from the minute my child was born, she knew she's a Black Puerto Rican.
Yeah.
And she had challenges with that. But at this point where we're at, that we got to give ourselves some time, but that also we have to understand, like Frantz Fanon said, colonized minds lead to, colonized lands lead to colonized minds.
Yes.
And part of the internal work is the internal revolution. And it's ongoing. But when you allow someone else to call you what you're not, to name you, they've already begun to take away your agency.
Yes.
We cannot allow that to happen ever.
Yeah. Oh, yes. That is so true. And I love that you said that because it's so true. Wow. Rosa, thank you. I'm so excited.
That's such a good time. I'm like, we're done. Oh man.
I know you don't listen. You just don't know, Sister Fran. I can talk to you about this all night because I love this type because it gives me energy because it's so hard to find your people. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That you can have these kind of authentic, transparent conversations with about real stuff. We have to start all this fluff and stuff that we do sometimes. And I do believe in showing grace and I do believe in trying to educate. But I also know sometimes we need spaces to just speak about it. You know what I'm saying? And just say what's really happening, what we've experienced personally and in our communities. To really be able to motivate each other and inspire each other, encourage, uplift, all of that. So I appreciate you for coming on today. I'm so glad that we were able to.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Yes. And I'm gonna keep in touch. I tell everybody, listen, once we become sister friends, I stay in touch, to check on.
We're coming on again.
Okay. Yes. I'm actually working on a project right now. I'll talk to you later about that once we're done and stuff. But I really would love to stay in touch and just, continue this conversation because I love your energy and I love the work that you're doing for sure.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being understanding. I was so crazy last week, as we all are, but I'm so looking forward to coming back. Thank you. I had an amazing time. Thanks for having me.
Me too. And I love your earrings. Those are dope.
Oh, yeah. Free Mumia, everybody. Let's get Mumia out, too.
Yes. Those are dope. So, again, thank you so much. You have a good evening, and I'm going to be in touch.
Okay. Thank you, sis. Thank you.
Right, take care.
Bye. Yeah, that was great.
Awesome. Oh my goodness. Y'all just don't know. I just feel so fueled and so motivated. I love conversations like that. I love people that are authentic and genuine. So again, you all, thank you so much for watching today and being here. And listen, I was told, my friend told me I have to tell people to like and subscribe our YouTube channel. Go there, go to our Instagram, like our page. I'm not good at stuff like that. I need to just have somebody else do it. But thank you for your support. If you feel led to do it, please go and like and subscribe. Our page is on Instagram and on YouTube. And we are on Spotify now. We do have a podcast on Spotify. So I'm happy about that as well. And a couple other places. So anyway, thank you all so much for your support. I really do appreciate you all. All right, take care.